Hi everyone,
Chris.
welcome to the last transmission. Back on a Tuesday, so Fridays didn't last long, did they? So we gave it a try, Paul, didn't we?
We did, and it didn't suit me, and I don't think it suited you, really, did it?
No, I mean, look, Friday's one of those days where I don't know whether it's same for you and you guys out there watching this, but I always have situations coming up on a Friday, or it's on a Friday on a weekend, something things you can't deal with. It might be a car. This week it's been a car issue. So Friday has just not been working out for me for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So back to the Tuesday, which seems good. Tuesday's that kind of lull still in the week, isn't it? So it's good to be chatting about the weird stuff on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, well, we'll do us best, and we're going to cover. Basically, we did talk about discussing missing people, strange vanishings, people that perceive they've seen something, like shadow beings, even that we seem to be getting reports of quite a bit up on cliff tops, which is a really strange one because it seems to go in waves. We'll be talking about the lights probably in 2 or 3 months' time. It's odd, but that's how it goes. And so we could, but don't limit it, people. I'm looking at chat now. You're going up towards 100. Don't limit it to missing people. If you've got something you want to throw at us, just come at it, and as we normally do with last transmission, and just share your information, throw it out there, because it's all down to you guys, really. We're just sort of batting answers back as we see fit. We're not experts. We're just exactly same as you guys. And I'm looking in chat now, and let's just have a quick look. We've got Tom Waters, hi Tom, Simon Riley, Simon Iron, Mogul, Alison's in. Good to see you, Alison. Andy H, Gemma Jackson, 1423, Susan Wiseman, Tonya Dragonborn. Let's have a look. Gemma Jackson, we've done that. So Sean Drew, let's have a look. Jack, 1948. And I've just run out of names. Cat in a Hat. And we'll do a little bit more, Big Shooter, and we'll do a little bit more later on. But we really appreciate support, guys. And remember, it's your stream. Let's see what your thoughts are on everything that we're going to be talking about. Pierre Sabaxin again. Great to see you, Pierre.
Yeah,
and Simon Riley. So I've got to stop. So where are we going with this?
Mean, like you said, Paul, I mean, you can, again, it's very similar to what we're talking with Andrew Goff last week, weren't we? And a lot of these subjects are connected. Some of the connections are tenuous, sometimes, but some of them are very, are much more obvious. And you mentioned, I just want to touch on that. You mentioned the shadow beings. Do you think there's any connection to that whatsoever? I mean, you must have thought about this because it's obviously prevalent at the moment.
It makes you wonder. I mean, I think we'd be wrong, any of us, I don't just mean me, to try and pin what's happening when somebody goes missing onto a true unexplained phenomena. We're a channel that discusses unexplained phenomena, and how do we word it so it's not disrespectful? These people have gone missing in unusual circumstances. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean that it's anything to do with UFOs, doesn't mean that it's anything to do with any aspect of the unexplained. But by virtue of the fact that they've gone missing in places where unusual things happen, I think that's where we need to kind of stand with it. And just at all times, I want to be as respectful as I can to the people that have gone missing, because there are people that have gone missing along eastern North Yorkshire coastline, just like all places inland and all over the UK. It's absolutely massive as regards the missing person statistics when you look at it. And these people shouldn't just be left to disappear into obscurity. The names need talking about, if not the names, that the cases need talking about, and putting into some kind of context that they were very real. And let's not forget, even if we can't find answers, because a lot of what we discuss, missing people aside, is all speculative. All of us, none of us have a true handle on what we're dealing with, really, do we, Chris?
Not at all. I think, look, you're right there in the sense that you have to be respectful, and we try not to jump to any conclusion. Sometimes you can't help but jump to the most obvious conclusion. But there's a particular case up there. Obviously, we won't talk about it much, but the young lad that went to the base, that's obviously one that people throw at me when I get talking to them. They always throw that at me if they know that I work with you. And again, it's a difficult case to talk about because obviously some people want to jump to that, the supernatural conclusion. However, there could be other darker, sinister reasons about what's gone on. We just don't know.
not 1,001 reasons, but multiple reasons why somebody goes missing. And just because, I mean, the guy you're on about, his car were left in the car park at Bempton RSPB. He might not have gone missing there. He might not have gone missing in that area. We don't know. It's all speculative, and it must be torture for parents, you know, and close family to hear somebody talking and putting it into context of the unexplained or something, especially if it's not your thing and you've had no experience of it, and you're not at the stage where you think, I've had a monstrous experience, as in like a mega experience with unexplained, and I don't have to be a believer now. I know it's real. If you've never come across that or never had that in your life, and then you hear somebody talking about your loved one in context with that, because I've heard people doing it on podcasts with these people, and it's wrong. It's absolutely, in my opinion, wrong.
It is, and I think, but at the same time, I also read something about that particular case where the parents were, you know, actually there were two cases because I think it was something featured around. Do you remember the Manchester Pusher case?
Yeah.
Obviously, just around the corner from me, and a lot of bad reporting went on with those cases. And it always does. I think you could say that really. Internet goes wild, doesn't it? About crime in general. Missing persons seems to be the top of the list, I suppose. But I think, you know, I remember. I won't go into detail, but when my dad went missing, I think we'd have been glad. The unknown often can be worse, so we'd have been glad of anyone looking into where someone disappeared to. Do you know what I mean? It's such but obviously, like you say, you've got to be respectful in doing that. I think
providing it's been done with respect, you know, then and you're dealing with it right. Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, Jimmy Gorman, who went missing in February, I can't remember year. So I think it might have been 2010. I contacted Gormans and spoke to them and asked if they'd mind if I looked into it. And then I worked closely with them, and we got case reopened. We got police records, looked into again, lots and lots of details about the Jimmy Gorman case that were really, really interesting. I mean, Jimmy, he was an alcoholic. You know, I mean, I don't mean there's out wrong with that. I mean, but that was Jimmy's life, and he'd gone into hospital, and he absconded from hospital, and I think he absconded in February of 2010. I might have got that wrong. It might be 2011, but regardless, he disappeared from hospital. But there were loads of discrepancies in the case. The nurse, when they looked for him, I think there were 3 different versions about the time he went. So we unearthed all them. That's not sort of paranormal events, but there were lots and lots of discrepancies in it. And it's all paper. The paper trails there. I unearthed all of that. And they said that he'd walked from Scarborough Hospital all the way along the Cleveland Way and entered the St. Oswald's Church at Filey. And he was found in the churchyard at Filey, I think a few days later. I mean, it's years since I sort of worked on this one, and as I say, I worked with Jimmy's brother-in-law, Steve, and between us, with my help, they accessed all the paperwork again. I looked into his bank records. There were loads of things, and they won't mind me talking about this, by the way, because you know I worked very close to him, and his bank were accessed after he'd gone missing, but police never found that. So it proved that there were activity afterwards. This, in my opinion, this weren't paranormal. Jimmy, bless him, I think somebody ended Jimmy's life. Do you know what I mean? But where it became interesting for me as regards the paranormal, Steve, before they found him, Steve's, the brother-in-law, had a premonition that he were in a churchyard and he'd been taken across a bridge. So that's where that aspect came in for me. That he'd been taken across a bridge. Well, guess what? There's the bridge going across the ravine in Filey that goes to the churchyard. And he'd had this premonition. And he'd had a premonition that Jimmy was in pink. And he thought it were when he told his wife and said, this is just ridiculous and Jimmy would never be in pink. I'm sorry for going around in circles here, people, but we will do this in detail. I'll get all paperwork for you guys and do this. When his body was released for burial, the funeral directors had put him in a pink gown. And he said he's got a pink dress on, and all this were in Steve's premonition, which were way before they'd found him, you know, which were really fascinating. So many interesting things that, you know, I don't think we're dealing with paranormal events as regards Jimmy Gorman and his disappearance from hospital and where he was found in the churchyard. But on top of that, you've got Steve and his premonition, and he sort of foresaw, he could foresee where he ended up. There's a narrow path and there's a ravine, and it were in, I think they call it Valley. Somebody correct me. It's Filey, so I think it's on, not Valley Bridge. That's in Scarborough, but there's a word for it anyway. There's a name for this ravine, and the churchyard runs along the side of the ravine. And he said I could see all this, and really fascinating.
Well, it weren't
after the event, Chris. This were before that he'd told all his family these things. There were lots more aspects to Jimmy. He got different clothes on to when he left hospital. How did he work that one out? We detailed everything he went in. He went in a black jumper, jeans, and white trainers. And when he were found, he were in a tracksuit. Yet the police and the hospital said he'd left the hospital and walked the Cleveland Way, that's along the coastline, and never made it home, and ended up and died in that churchyard. And you know, it's crazy with the stuff that we managed to uncover. Do you know,
it makes you wonder how many. I mean, look, we know nothing against the police. We know they're under resourced and you know, and all the rest of it. But it's strange that I know two people that have worked very closely with the police, looking for missing people and in murder cases. So the police, obviously, we all know that they don't publicly like to talk about this stuff, but I think in some cases, probably rare cases, and I think it depends on in which country you are and in which state you might be in, that sometimes they will, if they're very desperate, they will. I mean, if you look at all the well-known serial killer cases, I think they actually did consult a lot of mediums in that regard.
Psychic mediums. And
Yeah. So there's definitely an element of that to it.
Well, I found that one fascinating, and there's somebody in chat probably today. If not, they will watch it, and I'm not going to steal their thunder, and it doesn't concern Jimmy, but they sensed something in all places of Dane's Dyke, and a tragedy. And we don't know yet. We're kind of still looking into it, but it's fascinating because where they sensed it and where they got these feelings and these images. When I walked with Philip Kinsella and I never said a word to Philip, never said a single word, he stopped. And anybody in chat, people, what we've got 110 people in chat. Philip just goes, "Oh my God," you know how he talks.
Yeah,
extreme sadness. Something terrible's happened here, and he was in the zone. He weren't like 30 foot away, you were there. And I was just mesmerized. I were amazed that he was saying it. And then I took one of our team in, and I think Linny's in here today. I'm not going to go into detail, but Ian's quite sensitive to things like that. Never said a word to him. And I asked him, and he was picking up on things. And so there is a place for this, whether people want to believe it or not. I mean, as regards Steve and, you know, Jimmy Gorman's brother-in-law, having those premonitions and basically he didn't lead them to the church. All he knew was that he was in a churchyard at the side of a ravine, and he'd crossed a bridge in a valley, which is basically described the area and everything, and the clothing he was laid in. He said he's in a pink dress. And you know, like funeral directors, we have Sammy McCarr people, if you've not got anything that they want to put you in, they're doing this one at Bridlington, it'll be a blue gown or a pink gown, and they didn't have any blue ones, and they put him in a pink one. So it's just fascinating. Sorry if we've rambled there, people. Let's have a look. It's 7:15, and all I've done is talk about nothing really to do with paranormal, but it's
it is paranormal. I mean, before we get to some of the most blatant missing cases, Paul, from up there, I think we might want to touch on the phenomena potentially responsible or connected to some of this strange stuff. I mean, again, the loose and tenuous links. But what about I remember you Last time I was up, we were chatting, weren't we, about the Hornsey, the angler on Hornsey Beach.
The beach angler, yeah.
Yeah.
And once again, like you said, it's tenuous because we can't. It just shows, in my opinion, that there's a presence around us, maybe all of the time in areas. These kind of untouchable entities, and they are there. People are reporting on them. That these things are there and they are present. And the Hornsey one, it was January 2020, and this guy, we'll just use his first name, Lewis, and I've spoken to him, got the full report of him. We're fishing at Hornsey. Again, the seawall, he says, and it were absolutely raging, the tide. And just after midnight, he said it were an hour before high tide. And he's crouched down, and he says it's raging. It's nearly up on the beach where it normally would be, just in normal sea conditions. And he's crouched down, and up on further to his right, to his left, he's looking up the beach in the darkness, and there's a figure walking up beach, and the waves are crashing. He says, and it's just a stick of a figure. He says if it were a female, it's got to be the thinnest female you could imagine. I mean, I said to him, could you see the shape of hips or breasts, obviously the female form? And he said, no. He said it was just the thinnest figure you could imagine. He says, and I couldn't see anything but black. Normally, even if you've got a coat on, you'd see a little bit of something with a face. He says, and it's raging, it's windy, and it's just walking up the beach. And he's not frightened at this stage. He's got no strange feelings of apprehension or anything. He said, but I'd been sat there crouched for a while, and I stood up, not to show myself to this person, but to really just ease a bit of tension on my legs. And when I did, this thing stopped dead. He said, and it just pixelated out of existence. I mean, and absolutely frightened him to death.
Oh, it would.
And we'll I'll carry on with it if you want a little bit.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
So he's terrified. He doesn't wait. He phones his dad because his dad had dropped him off, and his dad were going to pick him up at the time that he wanted to come home. And he said, I've cut my line. I'm putting my tackle in the box. I've got my filleting knife in my hand. He says, because I feel like this could be just paranoia. But he said, I felt like it were there watching me. I could feel its presence. Whether he could or not, I don't know. But he said he felt he could feel its presence. And he described it as being no more than 5 foot tall, very thin. And I can't understand why anybody would be so close to the shoreline when sea were raging. Completely black from head to toe. I've got some notes here, so let's have a look. It vanished and pixelated, he reckoned. He told me over a period of about 6 seconds. His dad arrived 5 minutes later. Now, this is where it gets interesting for me, because the time between making the phone call to being picked up and arriving back home should have taken them no more than 15 minutes. We've got missing time. And I don't know whether missing time applies to him and his dad. He says because they didn't get, when they arrived home, he says the time was 1:37 a.m. And he'd seen it at 12:10, and they should have been home. They've lost 80 minutes of time. That's kind of worked it out that they'd lost 80 minutes of time.
Wow, now, interesting.
His home, they've got one-way glass. There's a lot of glass in the property. It stands in its own grounds, and obviously they've probably got, well, they have got blinds on the inside, but they don't usually shut them on a night because nobody can see in, but you can see out. But when that happened, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He felt like this thing was stood at the windows watching him. It just absolutely rocked his head. And I think it would rock ours. I'm sure it would rock mine. If we're getting glimpses of something on those cliff tops now, and it's unnerving. I'll tell you about, and I know some of our listeners tonight are probably been in on the Truth Proof one, so you might have to listen to this one again, guys. But it's still worth talking about. But there's something that's just outside of our visual that's able to slip in and out. I mean, I've been talking about Hunmanby sort of putting this talk together for Hunmanby and the arrival of the triangles just before the UFO landed. And these, not to do with missing people, but these three guys are watching these three triangles coming through the air from the beach, from about 2 miles in the distance. And they believe that when they get over the top, they're going to get this brilliant view of the underside. And then when that happens, they just disappear. They just vanish. So what's happening? If that being that Lewis saw on the beach had the ability to disappear, to pixelate out of existence, why show itself at all? Do you know what I mean?
That's a really good point, that, mate, actually. And Rick Allen makes a good point. I was just about to ask you this question. And that is the phenomena taking these people on purpose, or do you think that, the missing people were just incidental? And, it's a strange one, isn't it? Wrong place, wrong time.
Right place, wrong time, or right place for whatever's taking them. If someone were taking them, I don't know to be his answer to that, Chris and Rick. I've really got no idea, but they might never figure in whatever it is. Let's assume something of an untoward nature has taken people. We're not saying it has. They might never have figured in whatever it was that this phenomena was going about and doing. They just could be collateral. It's hard to know because we're only surmising. We're just guessing, aren't we? But I'm just throwing it out there with these things that people are seeing, like the being, this pixelating being that disappeared. What Lewis saw, the rock angler or the beach fisherman, sorry, and if that's what he saw, if that's a reality, then how many more of these things are walking amongst us that we're not even aware of? And just at the moment, we're seeing on a regular basis, we're seeing the shapes of things up on those cliff tops. We jump back to Linny's brilliant footage, what he took. Tell me month, Ian, I can't remember month, but you got that last year. There were three of us with thermal cameras. He'd only got his that day. Myself and Jeremy and Ian, and I think Pete were with us, I'm not certain. We're looking down the coast and we see that faint green light that looks like the dull glow of a headlight. So, but it never materialized. But it was walking up the coast. We thought it were Alex. So me and Jeremy, with our thermals, walked down to see why Alex hadn't arrived. In between times, Ian's filming this weird thing on cliff tops. We'd have all been able to film that, all of us. He'd only just got the thermal that day, still messing with colour palettes, he didn't even know what he was filming. And that's no disrespect to him. Everything was new looking through a thermal. So he turned away to see where we were, and we've gone to look for somebody who just weren't there, didn't exist.
So do you think
when
that was some sort of
when he
distraction?
turned back, it's gone. You what, Chris?
Do you think that was a purpose distraction?
I do. We all do. We think we were purposely distracted. I don't know why, but Ian managed to film it, which I'm glad he did. But we walked in opposite direction. We must have walked 50 to 75 yards looking for the person that we thought this green glow was. None of us imagined it. I know that Jeremy saw it, I did, and Linny did, and I think Pete were there. So there's four of us seen it, and there were two other guys up there actually. Two military guys were up there with us as well. Ian knows what I mean. They were up there that night, and Pete will know. So, why allow him to film that? Was that a mistake? Was that on behalf of the phenomena? If they're all knowing, would it have known that he had a thermal? I don't know. Or am I being silly? And is it military tech that were observing us?
Yeah, well, I was about to just say that, about just going back to the previous question there about what Rick Allen mentioned about the accidental. Well, you could argue that in many of the cases, particularly the ET contact cases, we'll call it ET just for loosely, they do know things ahead of time. They seem to know a lot about everybody. They seem to know everything about everything. So you could argue that they know these people. I mean, a lot of people say that they have the ability to, in some cases, in some of these contact cases, physically stop time. In some of James Bartley's cases, that you'll be in a restaurant and the whole thing will just stop. they'll be the only person moving in the restaurant. Everything just stops. It just freezes. So if they've got the ability to do that, who says they haven't got the ability to know full well ahead of time where these people are going to be and what is the best time to make contact?
Yeah, it's hard. That's a proper head bender, though. That isn't it? And I'm not saying that it can't happen, but can you imagine being in a restaurant and you've not only got, you could imagine that happening outdoors in a I don't know, some woodland environment, but if you were in a restaurant, you've got gas bubbling out, heating pans up, and you've got water running, and so there'd be all of those elements that they'd have to control, not just the people. The lighting, everything, the people outside. I know I'm talking about some exotic science and I've got no knowledge of it, but can you imagine the mechanics involved to be able to orchestrate something like that?
It's one of them again. Going back to, if you know exactly what's going to happen, then you can facilitate that. And it's just, look, I think those cases are pretty rare, but I think, you know, I've heard quite a few of them. So. And I think actually there's a movie where they demonstrated that called The Adjustment Bureau. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Brilliant film. Matt Damon and a few other guys, good actors in that. That's what they do. They just freeze the time and come in and shift things about. It's all about, what's it about? It's about destiny and...
I've not seen it.
What do they call it?
I don't know. Somebody will know in chat.
The thing you do was, there's another British film made about it. It's all about butterfly effect and that kind of thing. Well, really interesting.
Absolutely. You know,
sorry, Paul, I'm just going to read this question out.
Let's have a look at that then.
I mean, it's a tricky one, and like Sober Carper saying, it's difficult to give a definitive answer, but what do you think the stranger missing people cases are caused by one phenomenon alone, or do you think they work together? Now that's an interesting point, isn't it?
I'm not sure that any of it works together. You know, and I'll just use Hummonby as an example again, simply because I've been putting this talk together, and I kind of likened it to a magnet with loads of iron filings, and that was Hummonby. The industrial unit seemed to be the hub for the activity back in 96, 97, and 98. Nothing to do with missing people, but every type of phenomena presented. And is it the location, or is it a person that can evoke this and attract, almost like the iron filings to the magnet? So you might have many types of phenomena present and interested, but not even knowing why it's interested. A bit like animals being interested in a food source, you know, and it attracts from all different aspects, but areas, but none of them are specifically working together. I'm not sure the phenomena works together, whether it's one kind of godhead, and I use that term loosely. I'm not even doing it religiously, but it just fits. That's orchestrating everything and presenting as many things. I don't know. My gut feeling is there's a lot of things at work, and some of the things that happen to people, not even necessarily missing people, some of the sightings, some of the experiences, good and bad, some of it is just right place, wrong time kind of situations. And you stumble upon it. But as you've just said then, Chris, and I'm contradicting myself, it's a lot of the times it appears that this phenomena, whatever it is, whatever shape or form it is, does know in advance what we're going to be doing, does know that road will be empty at 1 a.m. when that car's going to be traveling on it for 2 hours and nothing will come, and we've got time to do this. Because everything seems, it's a perfect symmetry. Everything seems to work in some kind of disjointed, it must be some kind of symbiotic relationship where it runs parallel with us. They know, don't they? It works.
They appear to know. I'll tell you one thing that I do know works with them, and we know the military works with them. Now, it could be under duress in some cases, but I think there's enough information and whistleblowers out there now to say that the military are certainly working with elements of whatever these things are. So
once again, let's use Hummonby simply because it's fresh in my mind. The military were there.
Yeah,
the military were there, or some faction of the military, because they were all in black. And I throw it out there in lots of these live streams that I'm doing, Last Transmission and Truth Proof now, because I'm just hoping that some more witnesses come forward, that they knew they'd set up roadblocks, that they knew. And yes, so there's somebody...
and what's interesting, Paul, they weren't apprehending the ETs, they were apprehending the guys in the warehouse.
Oh, they'd got stopped. They were warned good and proper, as well as the other witnesses who were coming to see them in warehouse that night. They got taken out of their vehicle and into a vehicle, and warned not to say anything, not to believe anything they're told, given enough information about them, really, to be honest, to frighten them to death, that they knew a lot about these people. So they'd been on but this were orchestrated and it had been planned. So, you know, it's fascinating. The Urban Angler, we've not seen you in before, mate. The stuff going on is quantum physics. Thank you. And Tonya Morrison, Rivington Pipe Beast, Rick Allen. Let's have a look. We've done Sean Drew. And we've got 150 people in, and we're not going to get... But, oh, beware the moon, lads. Yeah, I like saying these names.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good one, that.
Yes,
it's a good one, that one.
Harry Poppins.
Well,
I bet you thought that one out.
Harry Poppins. I don't know whether I want to meet him.
So we've got any more questions? Have we? What we got here? Andy H.
Yeah, he's asking about the missing person.
Have you heard anything about the missing person from when I had the run? No, not a thing, Andy. Not a thing. And I don't think Andy will mind me talking about this, but Andy was up on the cliff tops a few weeks ago, and just went, like a lot of people do, just went to just view area. He's interested in unexplained, and got... No, he didn't get threatened, did you, Andy? And I'm talking, but I know you can hear me, but it weren't very nice. He's on one of the stands with his friend or his partner, and 3 people approached him, torch straight in face. What are you doing up here? And why are you up here and all that? And basically, what's it got to do with you is what I'd have said, and probably Andy said exactly the same, because there's no law saying I can't be up here. But anyway, top and bottom of it was that, you know, his partner did start to feel uncomfortable with his presence. They were doing a search and rescue. Somebody had gone missing, and they left. But when they left, they were followed, literally behind them, all the way back to the car park. When they got, first of all, let me just jump back a minute, and Andy will correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, Andy. I believe they said to you, we'll not set Mecca car, but that's your car in car park, isn't it? Which you said, yeah. So they got that one off to a T, but I suppose you would if that were only car in there. I'm not sure if it was, though, Andy, so you'll have to correct me on that one. And then when they got up to the compound, to the car, 2 more people appeared out of the edges. And basically, they said they were search and rescue, but according to Andy, who's got some experience of this due to his former job and things he's done, he said he didn't think they were search and rescue. Then when they left, they followed them all the way back to the Airbnb. How interesting is that? To answer that quickly, Andy, I've heard nothing. Just nothing more about it.
That wasn't search and rescue. Absolutely,
it doesn't sound like it, and no. You know, and it certainly didn't to Andy. And incidentally, we went up there. Oh, gosh, when it must have been. What day are we today? We're Tuesday. It must have been Friday night. Sorry, no, it weren't Friday. Wednesday night. And we met a couple up there. We actually walked down towards a white pickup because these search and rescue guys had white pickups, which is no writing on them. Nothing to say it's search and rescue or Coast Guard or anything. They're white pickups. Somebody might be listening to this and be able to just correct it and say we're wrong. So anyway, we saw a white pickup in back corner. So we walked down towards it, me and Linny, in the darkness, and this man and this woman got out of it because they were worried because there's 2 strangers walking down. Turns out they'd come down because they're interested in unexplained, or his wife was, but he described himself as an open-minded skeptic. But when we get down to Cliffs, he tells us he's never seen anything until he came up here last year, just before Christmas. He said last week in November, first week in December, and he's on the stand up there with his wife, and he says, in this dark shape. I said, I just caught it. This dark shape, just there. And if the stands, it's like a letter D, and there's about 10 to 12 foot between it. So it's bordered all the way around. So he's up there at one side, and this is just at the other side. So it's close. So what do you do? He says, well, I felt really unnerved. He says, we left. He said, I know what I saw. I said, you seen anything prior to that? Anything like that before? No, never. So interesting that people are seeing it. As my daughter 3 weeks ago came up with her partner. He's not interested in any of this. He only came up to probably just humour Gemma when we gets in the car. And I know I spoke about this other night, guys. I do apologise. But she says, tell me, Dad, what you said you saw on cliff tops. He said, I saw somebody walking. Literally, well, we're not talking like hundreds of yards away. We're talking like 20 feet away, just in the darkness. So put the torch on, or Gemma did, nothing there. We're all seeing it. What is it?
Don't know, but it does make you think, like you said, how many times, like in the early years when you and Bob Brown and Steve were going up there and you were looking out there, how many times it were going off behind you?
It's kind of hidden in plain sight, a lot of this. And we do enjoy going up there, you know. I enjoy the edge of things. I mean, I like getting up at 4:30 in the morning and parking my car up, and it might be foolhardy, but I enjoy it. I like that edge. And, we enjoy being up there. We prefer it when it's just us. And that's not being disrespectful to people who come up, because we always make time for people. But you can kind of get in the zone, and sometimes you'll go up. And you guys know in chat, all of you know, whether you've experienced things in your own home or whether you've experienced things in certain locations, you know that bulk of the time, my nose is itching. We know that the bulk of the time, nothing's happening. But when you get that buzz and when you can almost feel it, is that, what would you call that, guys? Is that a change in frequency? Why do we feel it? Why do we know that there's that sort of expectancy in the air? Because that's what it is. You get that feeling, that buzz. We can go down there and people go, something will happen tonight. And he'll hardly ever say that. You know, we could go 12 months and nothing happens, you know. But at the moment, it's these I don't know, these shapes of people that are just dark shapes. I mean, in fairness to the guy we spoke to last week, he didn't say it was the shape of a person. As a luck would have it, Ian walked to the other side at stand, and he's walking up, and he went, it was like that, but you couldn't see a head or shoulders. You could just see a dark mass, because it's a dark night, you know, there's no street lights up there. So I don't know what it is that people are seeing. I really don't, but it's not nice. It's made me think twice, really, particularly on cliff tops. I don't mind Danesdyke. I'll get up in early hours with the protection of the mighty Bobster, and we're good to go. Do you know, he don't know, does he? He's no idea, has he? He just walks along. He's as happy as oat. He's just he don't know fear, does he? Really?
Well, maybe he's just got balls of steel. Maybe he does know.
well, he don't seem to even. I don't know. It's weird, but maybe all dogs are like that. You know, maybe the night means nothing to them. It don't seem like he's hyper alert there when he's up there during the darkness. You know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they're just glad to be out, aren't they? Out and about with you, his mate.
Yeah, and John Paul Body, thanks for that. That donation, mate. You really appreciate that. But I want to jump on that name, John, because we've got to talk. This guy's had some incredible experiences and can back up a lot of what I'm talking about in that area. And we've only exchanged messages so far and emails. So you know, we've got to talk, please.
Cool. Yeah. Yes, yeah, let's sort that out. Beware the Moon Lads. Do you think there's anything unusual going on with the missing people in rivers and canals around the country?
I don't know. Chris might have more knowledge of that than me.
Well, we do, in the sense that obviously Manchester is well known. They had a very famous case, the Pusher case, but as far as I know, that has been resolved. But I think there are quite a few anomalies around that. I think there's quite a few people in the UK investigated that and spent a long time looking into it. And again, it's like anything. Rumors abound, go around on the internet, and it kind of muddies the water a little bit. But at the same time, you could argue that, you know, police are short on resources. So, and when they make a case, not a cold case, but when they can only commit so many people to it and they have to leave it, it's good that there are other people looking into these things and finding out really valuable information. So I tend to think there is something going on personally with it. because obviously, like you say, it's not just in this country; it's in other countries as well. So,
Yeah.
again, who is the person, correlating all this information and the evidence in the case? It's a mammoth task, isn't it?
It is a mammoth task, but and I wouldn't have time for it. But anybody who's good with correlating that type of information, it would be good to set up some kind of database and start collecting that information. I know that information will be out there, and there will be people doing it, and they'll be doing it to some degree, good and bad. It depends where you go with it. It depends whether you're just looking for the woo constantly. And if you are, then I think you're probably looking in wrong places, because a lot of this is going to be human error, slipping and falling. Humans who've done something bad to other people.
Yeah.
It's not all forced to be unexplained phenomena, and I'm not saying that just to spoil people's nights, but we've got to stay grounded in that. A lot of these missing people, it will be under tragic circumstances in some cases. I can't remember year. I think it was 2014, and on December I'm going to get this wrong. December the 14th, 2014, I think. And a huge UFO was seen on Valley Bridge at Scarborough at a tea time. It was a boomerang-shaped thing, monstrous UFO. And then it was seen in a few other places, and then in Hummonby, it'll get to people in a moment, so just bear with me. Then in Hummonby, it was seen by a guy called Jonathan, his wife, and their son. I think they were coming home from a school. I always forget what they call them, nights where you go, have you checked, they assess you and tell you how good your kid's doing or how bad it's doing.
Parents' evening.
Yeah, parents' evening. How easy was that? I couldn't even think of it. So parents' evening, and they saw this object. He rings his stepdad at the farm. Dad, there's this huge thing, this strange thing flying through the sky. Dad goes out, just misses it. And they phone a few other farms, and it stopped some wind turbines. I spoke to all the farmers, and it stopped some wind turbines, and then it flew to another farm, and it set off a big child's electrical train that not worked for years. Set all bells off. Well, they assume because it started working. Whistles went on it and things. So that was that. Later on in the evening, they're discussing what they could have seen, a bit like Bullseye. We'll look at what you could have won. So they're all disappointed because they realised it was something special. Go outside to have a cigarette. People have heard me talking about this before. And they just look up and it's there. It's above farm. And I don't mean you could hit it with a stick, but it's very low in the sky. It's monstrous. It's silent. So this thing had been seen. Now, where does the missing people come in? I think it was that day. And once again, we can't say that the UFO is responsible for this missing person. But that day, a man on Caton Low Road, quite out of character, and it were freezing conditions. There was snow on ground. There were ice. There were wind. He'd got an heart condition, and he walked along Caton Low Road, and he'd have gone past my daughter's house at Caton. So I know where the house is. And then he proceeded to walk, and he walked to Flixton. It's a hell of a journey. I wouldn't want to walk to Flixton from there, not in icy conditions. Then he walked up the 500-foot incline. You've been up into those woods, and they were missing for quite a while, and they were found in the woods a short time, a few weeks later, and they said that it was hypothermia that had killed him. Now that's possibly what it was, but isn't it coincidental that we'd had this huge UFO sighting on the same night that this strange outer character behavior happened with this man? Not attaching the UFO to his disappearance, but it's odd. And in the same area, but there'll be some people investigating the UFO phenomena who will firmly say, oh, that's what we're responsible. That's what took him, but we don't know. And it'd be wrong to say it was, but we can say it were unusual, I think, anyway.
Well, you can say it's unusual, and of course, you know for a fact that the regular forces wouldn't even be looking for correlations like that.
Nope.
And they just wouldn't even cross the mind. And to be fair, there wouldn't be a great deal they could do about it anyway. I would imagine.
Well, no, and it don't fit within anything that you could conceivably believe, because what we're talking about, for the most part, what nearly 200 people here in Chatter discussing, and your own experiences, people's not, mainstream, they're not going to believe it unless you've experienced it yourself. I'm hoping that most of the people in chat have gone past the, oh, I believe in this stage, because you've probably had your own experiences, and then you don't believe, unless you're just looking at a satellite and you believe that it's visitation from Venus, because that happens as well, doesn't it? You get people who see every little light, every little, I don't know, creak of a floorboard as some kind of paranormal experience, and it's not all that, is it?
No. Question from Lee Roscoe. Hi, Lee. Has there been any updates, Paul, from any of the people? Now, there's quite a few. So
no, you see appeals come out by members of the family every so often, usually on anniversary of these people's disappearances, or when they think they've gone, because in some instances, remember, they'll go missing and it might not be for a few days until they actually find a vehicle or evidence of where they've gone missing from. So it's always a bit loose where the actual date that they've gone missing. Let me just update you on one thing here, and don't read too much into it. Andy, who was on the cliff tops with his partner, and the search party came up, alleged search party, which could have been, and spoke to him. I'd forgot about this. It was I think, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I haven't got the dates in front of me. Let's just have a look. No, I don't have. Let's just have a look. It was March. I think it was March come on, Paul. I think it was March 1st. Somebody help me with this, and you'll see why. It was the same date that young lad went missing in the bunker. The same date, but that was 2010. So, which I found fascinating. So we've got a missing person, but from 2010, and I think it was March 1st. But it's hard when you've not got these dates in front of you. So when Andy had then people asked him what he were doing up there, and they were looking for a missing person. It just happened to be the same date as when the young guy went missing in 2010, which is interesting. Is there a connection? I don't know.
Interesting, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Stephen Collin, I wonder if these lights that are up there have anything to do with these disappearances, like the Min lights.
It's hard to say. Stephen. I spoke to a guy called David Ellis from I'm going to call it. I'm trying to mix Bempton up with Bridlington. I'm going to call it Bedlington. So from Bempton, and me and Steve had a long conversation, and he took his 2 Labrador dogs up to the cliff tops years ago now. I think we're going back to early 2000s. So there were no gate on where you look down into that field, and you could just walk down the field. He says, and as he looked over the cliffs, summer's evening, there's a mushroom-shaped light, but defined light that's on the ground, and he can see it hanging over the cliffs, and he can see it covering the path and going over like a bus. Imagine the size of a bus, just when it's hanging up. He said, and inside that light, there were inside this luminous, misty light, there were all other lights kind of punching out, but not getting out. Imagine like pushing into a balloon, and they could see them all excited, this energy inside it. And I often think to myself, because you get walkers along them cliffs. If you came across something like that, would you walk through it? What would you do? He said his dogs had paid no attention to it. He says they were watching a barn owl. I was Stephen Ellis or David Ellis, I can't remember. He was watching a barn owl just skimming the ground, and his dogs, 2 Labrador dogs, were just doing what they do. They didn't seem to have got any notion this light was there, and he just sort of looked at it and kind of mesmerized and turned and went other way. That's been seen on the base or something very similar. And one of our team who go up there has seen it. Long before I told him about that, he told me years ago that he'd been up there early one morning, not on the base. He'd been up on Cliff Lane, looked over and saw this luminous light on the ground, which is interesting. But whether Steve, that these lights are responsible for disappearances or not, I mean, we'd only be speculating if we said we thought they were. We've no idea, really, have we? We just know that these people are seeing strange lights. What about the coal man? I take it you're on about Adamski, the guy who were found. Are you the guy who were found on the coal heap? He weren't a coal man as such, were he, Tonya? But he were found on the coal heap with strange marks on his body, and yeah, it's a strange one, that, isn't it? And that in Todmorden or somewhere, I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was. I think there has been a few not interesting. I won't call them debunking, but there's a few. I don't know if it's been blown out of proportion, that encounter, but
I think it maybe has. Philip Mantle said that it had been solved, and whether it has or not.
Heard that.
Yeah, apparently, if it's true, the story was that this man wasn't well liked within factions of the family, and had he been to a wedding or something, and something had gone horribly wrong anyway, and the marks on his body where he'd been put in a vehicle, and it were battery acid or something like that had marked his body. Apparently, we'd have to get Philip in to talk about that. He's not well at the moment, so I wish him all the best. But I know Philip's got quite a bit of information on that. Tino says, "What, Chris? Hi, Paul and Chris. Please get James Bartley on your show. He's into some deep stuff. Thanks." Yeah, well, Chris, I've spoke with James a few times, and I know you have quite a lot, haven't you?
Yeah. We'll try and get James on. Often with James, it's the Australian, it's the time difference that causes the problem with the shows. But we can certainly try and arrange that. It might be a pre-record, but we'll see. We'll see if we can get him on. Rick Allen again. Paul, sure the entity was aware of the fisherman and chose to pixel out. It could have turned and walked away. Instead, it did what it did. Surely this was on purpose. Yeah,
I think you're probably right there, Rick, because it didn't even have to reveal itself. But I may be wrong. I'm never going to know, am I? But Lewis was crouched down against the wall. It wasn't until he stood up that it dissolved and disappeared. So there is a chance that it wasn't aware of him and were kind of stunned when he when that happened. I'll give you a story. We'll get to that in a moment. Well, I'll give you a story of my own, and just quickly. This house that we live in, and people know I've turned it into 3 flats, so it were a huge Victorian house with this big winding staircase that went all the way up. So I don't know about you guys, but if you move about in your home, if you're good at toileting at night or anything, you probably don't even put light on because you just know your way around your home. So it's over 3 floors, this house. So I went upstairs into the, you go up a flight and then up another flight, and you're on to the first floor. There were 2 flights of stairs to get to that. And downstairs, without my knowledge, one of the girls just come in and put light on to upstairs. And when Jess or Sarah put light on, there was a figure there, and I saw it, and it just went. It was as though it was shocked, and it looked like iron filings. It was just weird, and then it just disappeared. And then that must have been there. I know how crazy that sounds, people, but I don't mind saying it. I'm not going to pretend or lie to anybody anymore. If I've seen this, then I'm going to say it. And that's what I saw. Jess or Sarah, I don't know which one, put the light on, and this thing was just there. And it were almost like, and it just looked spiky and disappeared. Christ knows what that was. But that weren't meant to be seen. And it's some glitch, as in one of the girls put the light on. I don't think there were any harm to me, nothing, but there was something there in the darkness. But I think Rick's probably right. I mean,
it could have been a defense mechanism.
Yeah,
that it disappeared. I mean, you would, wouldn't you? If you could, you would.
Yeah.
How does it know what we're waiting for it?
Absolutely.
Denton Wolf Bolton, what if all these things are projections, influences from a future past AI intelligence? Yeah, I mean, look, it's a good a point as any, I think.
What if they are, Denton? What if we're creating some of this? What if by talking about this tonight, and you guys will have experienced this, you just like, what do they call it? Deja vu or anything, and you talk about something, you've not seen somebody for ages, and suddenly you see them. It's almost as though we've got some kind of forward knowledge of things that are happening at times. Maybe it's just a part of our brain that we've developed as much as whatever it is that's interacting with us.
Yeah, I think we're tuning into whatever it is, whatever mechanism they use to do what they do. I think we can do that. We're just not aware that we're doing that. We're tuning into this. Look, you could call it. Look, I think the New Age call it the Akashic Records, but if you look at quantum theory, someone we were talking about earlier before, if everything's connected, then we're connected to it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we unconsciously connect to it, and that's what these things are. And it's the same for, you know, the double slit, and the, you know, the deeper you look into the universe, and we create more. And it's the same for your life. You manifest these things because you think about them, and you energize it, and all the rest of it. There's other things involved in that, of course, but yeah, same kind of thing. Lee Roscoe, what do you think about seeing something, feeling something? It has the hitchhiker effects and slows time down. Has it traveled with you? Yeah, I mean, that's another point, actually, Paul, this hitchhiker thing, because obviously I don't think it's any coincidence that you're seeing these shadow things up there, you know, quite prevalent at the moment. And obviously that hitchhiker effect with all you guys is ramped up.
It's there. It's whatever that is. And only bit I'd kind of disagree with you there, Lee, on one bit. It travels with you. And I don't mean I'm right, but I don't think it does necessarily travel with us. That kind of implies that we're some kind of host victim, and it's attached itself to us. It's probably only attached itself to us via thought. I think these things are only a thought process away. I've spoke to quite a lot of people who recounted an experience from years and years ago, and they've thought they've revived it in some way. They think they've kind of just woke it up a little bit. And maybe they're right. Do you know? I mean, there were a guy who was telling me about, and I can't remember which it was his experience when with the creature that he saw sat on the house roof opposite, that climbed down the wall like a spider. And I'm sure it was this guy who said that he'd been thinking about contacting me for ages and ages, and he was somewhere, and he'd made the decision, and he's on a little country lane. He said, and as soon as he'd done that, he started to feel nervous and feel like it were watching him. It woke something up. It's almost like its eyelids have flickered. Do you know what I mean? So maybe we can revive these things. And, you know, like the intermind connection, the fishermen who were on the cliff tops back in November, and we're going back to probably 2015, 16, early evening, but it was dark. And he's up there fishing, edge at cliffs, as people know it's sheer and they get right on edge. And he's just looking at the stars, and he sees a star that he can't remember seeing before. He says, that's a big bloody star, that. And no sooner had he thought about it, he said, it were over my head. It's over top of me. So it's not a star. But he'd looked at it out at sea, this big bright light that he thought was probably a planet or something. He says, and all the blades of grass looked like silver, and everything looked like it were in monochrome. And it were just like seconds. It were there. Seconds he'd got this experience, and then it's gone. And that, in my opinion, is the intermind connection. He's connected with something. You become on their radar, don't you? You know, people who seem to have had an experience, and sometimes it might not even be an experience that were planned. It's just unless it is all planned, like you said, Chris, and they know everything. But after you've had the experience, it seems to continue throughout a person's life. You know, why would it start for us again? And I say us because it were all our family. Why would it stop at about 14 for me, and relatively nothing until I moved here in 1993, and then it just kicked off within days of being here, and it was just ongoing again till 1998, and then it simmered down again. You know, why would that happen? You know, we weren't concentrating on any of that, so maybe all that were planned to sort of start and kick into gear. I don't know.
Well, either that or you know, it's some sort of energetic portal type thing in the house, because that seems to me that there's something going on with the house. I mean, to have the exorcist knocking on the door, clearly, and for it to be the first house on the street. And it seems to me that there's obviously some history behind the house that you don't know about.
Well, it stood in a field on its own, this house, for years. Obviously now it's a terraced house because there's houses tied up to it either side. So it's anything. It's not detached. It is. We've no bricks link into it because this is red brick and all others are white, but it's still a terraced house. But it stood on its own, and the people that had it before us were into the occult. We know that with all letters we found. All bags of spirit letters, all symbolism on walls in top bedroom, and all pages of Bible where you'd lift floorboards up to find out wiring, and little St. Christopher's all over the place, buried all over. And they'd been up to somewhat deep. And then, as I say, we'd only been in a few weeks, not even that. And Reverend Tom Willis arrived to bless the house. We didn't ask him. He arrived. There's a book with that guy, because he's, and anybody in chat who's not heard of this man, you just do a little bit of digging, do a little bit of research on Reverend Tom Willis, the exorcist. And that's what he'd call himself, and he interesting man. He exercised that trawler, the trawler, the haunted trawler in Bridlington.
Did he?
He did, yeah. He exercised that, and a couple of my friends, well, Dave Quinn, Dave had worked on that trawler, and he'd experienced things, more feelings and strange sensations and things moving than seeing anything. But yeah, Dave and Tom. I don't think Tom worked on it, but Dave did. But yeah.
Do you think with a house, Matt? Do you think it was? Do you think the priest had arrived because of the occupants of the house knowing what they would have been doing?
I think he had done it before. I mean, Mary's just brought me a cup of tea. Mary,
yeah.
When that exorcist, the priest, came to our property in 1993, he said he'd been before, didn't he?
We did,
yeah.
To do with people.
Yeah. He'd been before. He'd blessed the house in the past.
Yeah.
All right. So it was the house, not the people doing what they were doing in the house.
Well, no, they'd been in it years. This elderly couple, but maybe they'd got too deep into it, because what we aren't going into too much detail. The elderly couple had lived in it and brought their family up in this property, young children to adults. And then I believe the gentleman died and she remarried. So quite when the occult stuff took place, whether it were before or after, I don't know. Do you see?
Yeah.
Because when we took this property, everything was in it. Pictures on sideboards, cutlery and drawers, even though chamber pots under beds. It were really, really old fashioned, and everything were there as though they'd just left the property, literally everything. And because the lady passed away, and this man who had no ties to the house and no ties to the family inherited it. So that's a bit deep, people. I know we're unexplained phenomena, so I'll cut it there with that one. And yeah, let's have another.
Yeah. If the thing on the cliffs is just outside the visible spectrum for humans, have you had any reports of dogs reacting to something?
Great question, Al. And I haven't. No, I haven't.
Well, the one in the woods is interesting, isn't it?
What's that?
Well, the whatever that thing in the woods was, from the other week. The dogs came running back.
That one where the dogs were frightened, yeah. But not on the cliff tops though, Al, because obviously people stress that dogs have to be on leads on these cliff tops, so maybe that might have some deciding factor. And now when you said other week, Chris, that's what threw me. Flixton, you're talking about Flixton with the dogs that came. They were frightened, weren't they? Yeah. And Steve Collins were with me when we got that account, and I've got Steve to thank for connecting me with them witnesses. But well, like I just said, Al, good God, just hold on a minute. Well, I'll have to have a drink.
If you don't swallow the fly. Yeah. In the meantime, let him have a drink of his drink. And Andy Rollins is asking, very tongue in cheek, but the question to dogmen surviving because of a lack of food. You back?
But I don't know what happened there. Sorry, guys. Give somebody a laugh anyway. Where were we? I know you're doing your question. Go on, and we'll address it.
Just answering Andy's question about the dogman. I suppose a flesh and blood creature surviving, in the UK or anywhere, actually, for that matter, because of a lack of food is often cited as being big factors to their existence. Again, we've talked about this, haven't we, quite a bit with the dogman. Look, all right, we have got some. I don't like that name for a start. Certainly in the UK, I know.
No.
But then again, you can appreciate why you wouldn't call it the werewolf.
Yeah.
Because generally a werewolf transforms.
when you look at the word werewolf, people think about lycanthropy and the transformation, which we know is impossible. It's impossible. But we're talking about, I'm not saying subscribing to that idea, by the way, but we're talking about something that sounds impossible. You know, as soon as you mention the word werewolf, people are just thrown into movies and silver bullets, and there's none of that if you look back, you know, in deep into history. But Dogman's equally ridiculous, isn't it? The both, but they're only words, the words that fit something. But as regards nothing sustainable for these things to exist, I'm kind of on that page. I think we'd be seeing these things if they were real, and one thing contradicts the other or counters another, because they are real, but they're not real in the term that we're thinking about, as in something that's flesh and blood that could come up and bite you on backside. There's something else, and they're coming from somewhere else, in my opinion. Don't mean I'm right. I don't know what happened to my throat there, guys. I didn't like that.
I think in years to come, I think you said it on one of the shows a few weeks back. In years to come, you know, people are going to think what we're talking about is just, they think we're back in the Stone Age sort of thing, with the way that, you know, our ways of thinking, our methodologies, our science, it's all going to be outdated. And I think, like you said, we just don't understand this phenomena fully yet. I think some people certainly do.
You've just said in years to come, it's like we're talking in Stone Age, and I will wholeheartedly agree. But look where we'd have been if we'd have been talking about this 100 years ago. You know, look at where we are now to where we would have been then. Look where we would have been. Let's just use the UFO. I think that's the safest example of the unexplained to talk about, because I think a lot of people now accept the fact that these things are real. You know, even people who aren't interested in the subject. So it's a subject that you can talk about and not get the eye roll and the laughs as much as you used to be able to. Let's jump back 50 years. You couldn't have done that. The people that are brilliant witnesses that are coming forward now and sharing their experiences wouldn't have done that 30, 40 years ago, would they? But they will now. So look where we are now. It's like the equipment that we're using to try and detect it. Thermal cameras, infrared cameras, motion detectors. We're detecting something. 40 or 50 years ago, the military might have had some of this tech, but we wouldn't have had it then, but we've got it now. But we're no closer to knowing what it is. That's the big one, isn't it? We want something that can tell us what it is. And none of these things that are out there beyond our ability to detect them, our ability to perceive them, none of them come back to tell us what they're about, do they? And them that do, and have done throughout time, tend to have tricked the cults and the groups that have got together, and in some instances they've maybe been given this information by these unknown others, only to find that they've been tricked. There's a trickster element to all of this, really.
For sure, yeah. Stephen Collin, Paul, was at Staxton Woods yesterday morning, saw a brilliant ball of light over East Field. I videoed it, but it would not show up on my phone, although it was in sight. Then it vanished.
Yeah, a lot of things, as you know, Steve, seen around Eastfield and Osgerby, which is all close to Scarborough, close to RF Staxton Wold as well. And so you were in Staxton Woods, and as Chris touched on earlier, when we had my little sort of brain fart, because I couldn't remember them dogs. But that's where two separate witnesses, husband and wife, and another guy and his partner, on different occasions took those dogs up into woods and saw the back and the tail, furry tail of something about 2 foot off ground, just moving at side of the dogs. Frightened one of the dogs to death, to the point where the dog ran off yelping like it had been hit, and they had to find it. And when they did actually find it, you know, because wife went down for a whistle to whistle it, she went back home. And when she got back up onto Staxton Wold in their vehicle, husband's coming back and he says, "Get in car quick," or "Get in vehicle quick, get in." He says, it's here and it's following them. And then the other couple are saying something remarkably similar. And what is it? It's something that's just in and out of our reality, isn't it? And we're literally probably 500 yards, maybe, 500 yards from RAF Staxton Wold, if you just went over hill. And I'm not saying radar should have detected that, but we're that close to a military base. which is a sensitive military base. And these couples have seen that. It's fascinating. It's pretty close to where we went when you made Elusive.
Ah, right, yeah.
Yep. So Alison's got a question here. What's that?
There are people who are found unidentified in suspicious circumstances. Makes you wonder where they came from. Yeah, all over the world. Yeah.
It does, doesn't it, Alison? Because we wouldn't know what nationality they were necessarily. If they passed away. So are they being moved? Are they being placed somewhere else? I can't remember names, so I'm not going to go into details. But there were a man went missing in Bridlington, last seen on Bridlington Harbour, and his name was Keith Bottom. That's his exact name. Seriously, I'm sure of it. And he went missing Bridlington Harbour, not seen. Divers searched the harbour. This is where it's interesting for me. Underwater team searched the harbour. I think they did it twice. And then they found him in the place that they'd searched, which I found quite fascinating. Do you know what I mean? And the news report actually said, they found him and they'd searched the harbour. They've done extensive searches in all the little nooks and crannies. And then where they'd previously searched, this tragedy unfolded and this man was found. Is that paranormal? Is that unexplained phenomena? I don't know, but we do hear in cases.
It sounds very missing 411, doesn't it?
Yeah, where people have areas that have been searched, and there's not these people who've supposedly gone missing have not been there, and then they've been found in the place where it's previously been searched. And I've got a perfect example of that, but it's not a person. During the sheep fatalities, 2017, 18, and 19. I used to do a grid walk of the field at about in between 4:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd go into these fields, then I'd go into wood, and then I'd come out. And it weren't a labour that I didn't enjoy. I loved being out with dog, and I just enjoyed it, even though I was finding these animals. And I did it this morning. There's nothing to see, and I went into wood, and I came out of the wood. All the sheep, as people will know, when you look at them in field, they usually have a number sprayed on the side of them. This one, number 35. And this farmer had told me previously that because I would do 3 days a week and he'd probably do 2. And the other few days, one of us might just go in and have a look, see if there's any more animals to be found, because they were losing quite a lot. And he told me, let's assume I went in on Wednesday. He'd told me that on the Sunday or whatever, one of his sheep had gone missing, one of his lambs, but Labrador size, not a newborn lamb. It had gone missing. And he said the number of it. Didn't say the number of it, but I'll get to that. He said it had gone missing. So I'm looking for it. And I looked in the woods. They've got fox, we've got badger. Any kind of UK predator might have preyed on it. It could have injured itself and been taken. So I did that, and I'm walking back. And as I walk back across the field, it was split in half with a big double gate. So I come through that gate just to conserve grazing, and shut the gate behind me and looked up the field. And in front of me, literally like 50 yards in front of me, when I would have seen it when I went in, it's there. It weren't there. It just weren't there when I came an hour and a half, 2 hours earlier. Walked over to it. It's cold. It's not bloated. I'm sorry if I make it sounding. Let's just say it how it is, because if they've been dead a while, they swell up with gases and whatever. It's cold. It's not bloated. It's got a front left leg missing, and I believe it had got its ears missing and eyes. Can't remember exactly now. So I rang the farmer, and I said to him, I've found a sheep. I said, what, it number 35? He said, yeah, it was. I said, you can't have done. I said, it's here. So I found it. And he couldn't believe that. He said, and his reasoning was a fox must have brought it back. Seriously. Now that was truly unexplained for me, that one. And anybody who's dealt with livestock will know that doesn't happen. But that did happen. And, and I'm just a strange one. Look at time already.
Yeah, very unusual. Fire Spirit says, Paul, just before you started coughing, there was a spirit voice, I think. You might want to go back and check that out.
Seriously, well, we will have a listen, because quite a few people sent me little frame captures when I said I thought I'd seen something a few weeks ago. But I don't know where that come from, Fire Spirit, but I didn't quite like it. There you go. We got Pierce back here.
Pierce back. Are we living in simulation as it seems that this intelligence is able to manipulate reality? Yeah, absolutely. I think that is where mainstream science is now. That's where physics is now. That's what they say. They're pretty much certain of it. I think they said they're 90% certain about this.
Manipulating reality. That's frightening, though, Chris, isn't it? You know, it's and Pierre, it's frightening.
Well, I think we're all manipulating reality, mate, in our own ways. Like I said earlier, I just don't think we're aware of it. And some of us, you know, manipulate reality in a small way, and others in bigger ways.
Yeah,
and I think
we're
that's
definitely
what
influencing things, aren't we? I mean, you know, these questions are influencing our answers and different thought processes, and so I suppose, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, do you think potentially that talking about what's going on up there in these figures is evoking more of that?
It ramps it up. I think it ramps it up, and maybe we underestimate the power of our own minds. Obviously, if we can meditate and concentrate, and as some people believe, bring these things through and get into that kind of zone where we can connect with these things, then it's definitely a mind thing that's helping us get that inter-mind connect. And I always cite the Ouija board, which we don't use. I'm not asking people to use one. I don't use one myself, but it's only it's just a board, a piece of wood with letters on it. It's nothing more. It's not magic. So it's the input that comes out of here that creates whatever, and you know, and it's just a tool, isn't it? That's not got any special properties any more than a piece of paper has. But the special properties and it's the input that's coming out of the mind, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. Mary Poppins.
I know.
Paul, would you consider contacting the military to work in tandem? Don't let Les write the initial letter.
Les might be listening to this. Les can write a letter, Mr. Poppins or Mrs. Poppins. I don't want to be discriminatory. I don't know. I don't think that. To be honest with you, I'm not sure that they'd want to work with anybody. They'd have their own agenda, surely, and they might observe certain things that we're doing. I'm not saying that we're important enough to be observed, but they may observe certain things that we're doing, certain bits of footage that we're talking about and putting out. They might be laughing to themselves, saying they might have thrown that sphere of light that I got on the hill that time and thought, let's see whether these guys who are up there all the time can detect this. Let's see whether they managed to catch it on film. Let's see what Linny and Paul and Pete make of this thing that we're going to put on Hillside. You know, some of it could be military tech, and we've got these guys going up there all the time looking for it. Let's see if they can detect it. If they can detect it, then we know other people will be able to. It could be as simple as that with some of these things.
Yeah, I think it is, but I'm absolutely certain, and you only have to look at the history of ufologists to know that I'm absolutely certain that I've heard voices when I've been on the phone with you many times, and I'm not the only one that said it.
We said that other week, actually, didn't you?
Yeah.
And that brings us to something. I mean, we got a voice message on our phone, and my auntie ringing us, and she said something, and before she hung up, and her voice says on the line, "I don't think so." Mary says, "Come and listen to this." It's not her; it's a male voice, and I know people in team, and we'll set team because I don't want to say the names. They might not want me to say it, but they've heard voices while they've been speaking to me, while they've been speaking to the relatives, and it's not just one person. There's a few been coming at us recently talking about hearing voices on the line, which is interesting. I don't know what it's all about, really. Whether it's obviously Paul, they can't be that stupid. They must be doing it to make me aware or make us aware that they can hear us.
Well, I think they are, and I think you could say what we're all doing is inconsequential, really, to them.
Absolutely.
When you look at the resources they've got and what they're doing and what they know or what they think they know, but we do know that for a fact that they were hiring the guy. We spoke to the guy. You know the guy that they hired to go up there and observe. So you can bet your bottom dollar that there is someone up there observing now at the moment, for sure.
Absolutely. You know, like you said, we met the guy who'd been employed within the military to observe up there. And that was for bringing down the light. And he wouldn't go on camera, but he'd sit and talk to us. It weren't like an email exchange where we're just surmising. We met the guy face to face, and he'd got some interesting things to say. When I first met him, he wanted me to give him my phone. And he put his phone in his vehicle, and he took Bob Brown were with me, and he took Bob's phone. He was so unsure about talking to us. And he weren't getting anywhere because I made sure my vehicle were in front of his, so he weren't driving off with my phone. But you know, you're interesting. If we're filming and experiencing things in these locations, and there's the potential for, I don't know, something to be learned from it by some government agency, I'm sure that they would be interested. When I was looking into one of the jet plane tragedies over at North Sea in the 1985 one, and I was speaking to trawlermen who'd been involved in retrieval. There were a message left on our phone, on our answer phone, and I recorded it on a voice recorder because it was a recording of the lads, the trawlermen in the fishing warehouse talking.
Yeah,
and that had been then left on my answer phone, and I took it, and they said, "Have you been recording us?" I said, "No." I said, "That's been left on my answer phone." You know, just weird mind games.
Well, talking about, just briefly, just talking about coincidence, just that guy who retrieved the navigator. What are the chances of him being involved in 2 incidents?
Absolutely.
I mean, same guy. I mean, that is beyond coincidence, isn't it?
When you talk about coincidences, that aircraft crashed on December the 12th, 1985. The boat that retrieved the navigator on December the 16th, obviously 1985, was called the Betty. And the crew member, Tom, was the one who retrieved him. His other crewmates weren't involved in. They were on board, but Tom wanted to work and get this poor man on the deck. Then, and I'm not going to get years right here. I'm pretty sure, but I think it might have been 87. They were on the same boat, the Betty, and the same man said, "I've seen a man," and I think they were 6 to 8 miles out at sea off Bridlington and Flamborough, and he said, "I've seen a man in sea." And they're just going, "Have you? Don't be so stupid," kind of thing. I don't know what wording was, but might have been swear words as well. But don't, you don't be daft. You've not seen anybody. He says, "I have. I've just seen somebody." And obviously, if you've got swell, and so this, in his words, he says, "We steamed out to where I'd seen him, and sure enough, there's a man in sea." And we got him on board. He were alive. He died before rescue services could get to him, but he'd gone down in a Cessna aircraft. They never found Cessna. And he shouldn't have been over the sea from South Emsall. So when they got him on board, he was just in a casual shirt, normal shoes and trousers. And so that's a mystery in itself. But the fact, as you pointed out, that the same boat and the same crew member were responsible for finding 2 bodies. 1985, and I just can't get someone tells me it was 87, but I could be wrong. And yeah. Interesting, and I did contact Airfield respectfully, but they never got back to me. But I got loads of information and Board of Inquiry report for the tornado. Yeah, interesting, tragic, interesting.
Yeah, beware the moon, lads. If this phenomena can take people from one frequency to another, it has the ability to move people like us who don't have that ability with it, or is it opening a portal and moving everything through?
I don't know. I mean, do you know, Moon, myself and Chris filmed a lady for the documentary, Lisa, and Lisa and her husband. When we talk about portals, do you know, openings, it's just a word, but I often think to myself that she's probably seen what people would consider to be a portal. And what did she see, Chris? You remember this, when we walked along the beach and her husband, they saw this light, didn't they? This oval, shimmering oval.
Yeah, they said, I think she described it almost like she thought at first it was some sort of mirror, like reflecting, like when you shine sunlight off a mirror and
Yeah.
it reflects on the wall or something. She said it was a bit like that, didn't she? About 2 foot, high.
About 2 foot deep, 24 to 30 inch deep. But where it stops being a mirror for me is that she's looking up on the cliff thinking somebody's doing this, shining it down, but it's off the ground. There's no background to bounce it off.
Yeah.
It's just on the beach.
And they walked around it as well.
They walked around it, yeah. And how crazy is that? And I'd have wanted to touch it. I know I would. I'd have wanted to just. I just would. It's probably stupid, but I know I would have had to. Just as it was just like looking at liquid or chromy type liquid, weren't it?
Yeah, and you can, when we get the film out for release, you'll hear more about that, about all the details about that, because
it's a great account.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you another one while we're on with that, guys. Then we'll get to some of these questions. I don't know whether Lorraine. Well, I know Lorraine will have got a load of questions sort of lined up, but don't feel obliged, Lorraine, because we've got plenty to talk about. But same beach, Speeton Beach, group of anglers. I'm not going to say 3, 4, or 5 because I can't remember. Went down there fishing off the rocks during the night, not on the cliffs, off the rocks. Now, a lot of the time, these anglers, they're really familiar with tides, and like my good friend Andy Barmby will go along the cliffs to better fishing areas, and he'll get himself cut off by the tide deliberately. He's safe because he knows he's on high ground and he's not going to, come to any harm. And then as the tide recedes, obviously he's going to go home. During the night, this group of anglers claim that suddenly everything became golden, literally just everything. And it were daylight, but it were gold. They took the clothes off down to their underwear. It were red hot. And they thought they could see beings in the golden haze. Seriously. And they were frightened to death. They didn't take the clothes off because they were sunbathing and thought this is fun. They were frightened to death, but they were too hot, and they removed the clothes. And it's not warm weather; it was winter, but it wasn't when this golden appeared, whatever this was. But they couldn't get away. The tide were in; they were stuck until the tide receded. And I know they've not been back there.
Well, no wonder. I mean, that's interesting.
These stories. Sorry, Chris, go on.
Yeah, interesting for 2 reasons. And that's because obviously it's reminiscent of a lot of the accounts. It would explain, if that was the case, why people take the clothes off. We know in some cases it is hypothermia, but we also know that in a lot of these cases, and we'll talk about Raymond Johnson shortly, that's just not the case. But also the golden haze reminds me of the trawlermen case as well.
Yeah.
The guys that went at the fishermen that went out to sea, and the compasses were going wild.
Well, yeah, and this is one that we ought to do in a few weeks' time in detail, because it's really good. Because I know that what happens is you start throwing a date out and you might get date wrong because it's coming out of here and it's not on a piece of paper in front of me. But this particular fisherman took a group of boat anglers out to what were called the 10 wrecks, which is a good distance out in the North Sea. And this guy and his son prepared the boat in the early hours of the morning, got the buckets of bait ready, everything's ready to go. And then these guys arrived not from the town, just from outside of the town, probably Doncaster or Leeds or somewhere. And they chartered this boat and they went out on this fishing expedition. Another boat followed them out. I can't remember time, guys. I wish I could. It bugs me when I've not got that information in front, but it's early hours. It's early morning. Let's say 5:30, 6. Follows them out. His exact words were, we were going to go to the head end, that's Flamborough Head, and then we were going to do a bit of mackerel fishing. Then we were going to sail on to somewhere else. I can't remember where he said, and then on to the 10 wrecks. And he told his son, because he put a plotter in, a chart plotter, so this boat would all he's got to do is follow the plotter and it'll basically sail itself out there. Obviously, and he's not a young lad. He's not like his son who's like a 10-year-old. This guy's in his mid-20s, so he's quite familiar and capable of sailing the boat. And he says, I've been working during the day. I've been up early doing this bait. He says, I'm going to get my head down. I'm going to have a sleep. Wake me up when we get there. Says, and it's a brilliant story. First-hand account. I've known this guy years. And he said, I've not been awake 5 minutes. He says, don't feel like that. He says, and he's checking me. We're here. He says, what do you mean we're here? He says, we're here. He says, we can't be. And the journey should have took them. They got, I don't want to say time, but they got there an hour and a half early. That's what I'm saying. And I know it were an hour and a half early. He says, and look, when I woke up, he says, and I looked around, he says, everywhere were golden. He says, I couldn't believe what I were looking at. He says, there were no seagulls. He says, and there's bait buckets are full of chunks of fish and other bait. He says, and normally a cloud of seagulls follows you out. So there's nothing. The water looked like oil. He said, it was just that calm. He said, it were weird. He says, it were totally silent. He says, I was a little bit frightened. He says, I thought we were in eye. He says, I thought if this is a tornado or a hurricane, we're in the eye of it. I says, I couldn't think of anything else. I'd never been in anything as still. He says, it was like there were a sun shining, but I couldn't see it. Everything were golden everywhere. And his exact words were, it were the colour of a golden Labrador. And, you know, he just used his terminology. That's what he said. He says, I'm looking around. He said, and I set my radar. It's coming back to me a little bit, this now. And you've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 miles. And I think he said they were about 15 miles off Bempton. He says, and I set it. No, nothing. 20, nothing. 30, nothing. To 50 miles, there's nothing. Well, there's nothing. Radios don't work. Nothing. He says, and lads said, I thought you said it were going to take us so-and-so time. And he says, and I just went to him, just bait up, fish, get fishing. He said, I didn't want to panic anybody. And I just told, that's my exact words, well, just bait up and get fishing. He says, they were pulling fish out like it were no tomorrow. He said, one of the best days fishing we'd ever had, unbelievably. He says, and then all very slowly, water started to get a bit choppy, a bit of movement in it. Radio bounced into action. Radar, you know, the onboard radar started working, and a voice come over at radar, and he answered it, and he said, the boat behind said, we were panicking. We thought you'd gone down. You just disappeared. So an interesting story. There's a lot more to it because I'd love to. And he said there's the chart plotter. There were a big gap in it. That boat since sank. It was me that rang him and told him it had sank. They sold it and it sank off Whitby. But that's nothing to do with it. But he said, because we were going to try and retrieve the chart plotter information, but it's gone down, that boat now. But also all we've got is his logbook. But interesting story. And once again, we've got that golden, that word, everything were golden. I just love these stories because they bend people's minds. And there will be people listening to this who'll go, what a load of BS. Well, I'm not making it up, people. But there's a lot of people who are telling me things and they're all making it up. Everybody's lying. But they're not, you know. Do you know what I mean?
No, cat in the hat. Paul, is the shadow figure always seen near or at the same stand?
Well, we find ourselves at this same stand quite a bit. And as Pete pointed out the other day, on... oh Christ, what night was it? On whatever night, anyway. As Pete pointed out, more seems to happen there. We're at the back of that hill where things seem to occur. But we have seen this. It's strange. It's a strange thing to be saying. Like, we have seen this in various places further down the path, crossing the path. As I say, the guy who were up on the cliff tops on, I think it was Wednesday night, he claims that he's just at one side at stand and this thing just moved up. He says, I just literally saw it move up. He says, and then it had gone. And I said, how did you feel? He says, frightened, unnerved. He says, and I don't think he told his partner. They just walked back to the car and then he told her. So that was first time he'd been back since either the last week in November, first week in December of 2024. And, you know, and we met up with us and told us that, which is, it's a strange one, isn't it? But I don't know. I don't know what it is. And it's interesting because, you know, some of the rock anglers talk about seeing what they call the ghost of big railings. You'll have heard me talk about that before, where they'll be fishing and they'll look at one of these stands or a little bit further up. And we're not talking about miles up the coast. We're talking about like 50 yards and they'll see a light, circular white light. And they might just sort of leave the rods or say to the mate, just keep an eye on my rod, I'll just go see who that is. And when they get to it, there's nothing there. Yet they're both seeing it. And there's lots of them that have seen this, what they perceive as the ghost of a fisherman. And because they wear these headlights, they're fitting it into a box called normal, and that's what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? And it's definitely not normal, because if it was a person, it's not going to just disappear. There's a guy called Dominic came on Cliff Tops, and we met him a couple of times. I think we met him once this year and a couple of times last year, and he's given me a brilliant account. And he were up there with his brother-in-law, who was a police officer. And Dominic said, I saw this light just on path further down. He says, and I just walked down to sort of say hello, and, you know, I don't know, just say hello. So when I got down there, there's nothing there. And then the phone went, and he's on the phone, and there's other voices on the phone. And the people who he's speaking to, he says, are literally freaking out. And I filmed this guy, and have you seen footage? I don't think you have you? He's telling me all about it. And he says, and he says, these people are speaking as you're speaking. He says, and I can't hear them, and they can hear it all. He says, and then when I get in my car, he'd got some kind of radio that will pick, you know, aircraft transmissions up and things like that. He says he's had it years. He says it never malfunctions or anything. Hard button to press to get it to come on. He said, and suddenly we get in car to go home. He says, and it just comes on full blasting car. Just literally just makes us jump out of our skins. Just strange things. And yeah, that jumped threw me straight back to Hummonby when the guys, there were a guy sleeping in a caravan in the compound at the back. And he were moaning because the car radios were playing and the lights were coming on the cars in the night, deep dead of night. And when they had a bit of an argument, this guy and the boss, and when they pulled bonnets at cars, he'd remove batteries because of fear of theft. This just shouldn't be happening. It can't happen. But look, we're dealing with unexplained phenomena, people. So most of the people in chat now, you've had your own experience. You know what you've seen. You know what you have experienced does not work within the laws of physics and science. So you have to give these guys a little bit of respect when they're telling me these stories of things that shouldn't be possible.
Absolutely, yeah.
Anyway, I never shut up, do I?
Oh, look, the thing is, mate, you're not really even touched on all the stuff, all the folders, the books, the files. I mean, there's just piles and piles of it.
It just looks like, honestly, it looks like a bomb's exploded, because I was looking for when you said we were going to touch on some missing people's cases. I know there's one from, it's really historic. I think it's 1927, but it's really interesting, and it's been done by one of top missing people researchers in the world. Well, I've done it. And I can tell you I've done it right, and everything's correct and as accurate as it's ever going to get. And it's wrong what's being done. And I wanted to go through it, not to do a number on whoever's done it, just to set the record straight. And
just to point out, because I think not just in that genre, but in a lot of genres, if you're in another country and you can't get to the facts, and you find yourself filling in the blanks or taking information off a third or fourth or fifth hand witness, there's going to be obviously holes in the story. And then I think sometimes that can come back and bite that researcher on the arse a little bit. It's a difficult one.
No, but I heard it and I'd already looked into it and dismissed it. And then I heard it being talked about. So I thought, right, we'll have another look at this. And it involved a guy called... His girlfriend were called Nellie Vickers, and this guy was Thomas Henry Bennett, and they'd come from Liverpool, from Speke in Liverpool. And I've not got the full details in my head. I'd need a bit of paperwork in front of me. And he'd come because he was suffering from depression, and he was staying at his relative's house, who was a major or some kind of colonel in the army in Bridlington. But the original story, that's was as it was, and that's the truth of it. But when it was done as a missing persons case, it said he'd come to see his sweetheart in Bridlington, which didn't happen. He'd come with her. He said this major, whatever he was, or colonel, whatever he was in charge of the case. No, he weren't. It was his relative. Said he didn't have an history of depression. Yes, he did. That's why he'd gone to Bridlington to recover. And he said nobody saw him jump over the cliffs. Yes, he did. There was a guy in an allotment who saw him go over the cliff. So I just think it's not everything's unexplained phenomena. I guess that's what I'm saying. And it were an exercise in looking into it to find out the true facts of it. You know, it was still an unusual case. They were never found. And when I say he jumped over cliffs, it were at Sewerby. And you can literally, I think I could still jump and sort of scramble down and onto the beach. So this guy were never found, but it's still an interesting case. And
Yeah,
Thomas
sure.
Henry Bennett,
Yeah.
and you know, so but there's lots of them, and I think maybe we should, I don't know, not next week necessarily, but in a couple of weeks, just get a bit more paperwork in front of us and revive some of these. Right? What's Linny saying?
Sure.
Here?
Lenny. Paul, I was talking to Pete this week, and he remembers, as do I, the small shadow things moving on the path on the top stand last year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Do you know, I was thinking of that, Linny, and I didn't see them, but I remember you saying you'd seen them, and Pete saying you'd seen them, and other people. And so that's that. So in answer to the question, is it always in the same place? Then no, because Linny's just sort of given us that one, hasn't he?
Do the shadow people on the cliff top, this is Beware the Moon lads again, do the shadow people on the cliff tops ever show up on IR or thermal?
No, we've not seen anything. And to tell you what I've been doing, and we've got Tom Waters to thank for this. I've been setting on a tripod every time we go up, because I had a couple of trail cams, but Tom were really kind and sent me some trail cams, really good ones. And I've set them up on a bar, and they're facing all directions, and they've got a good range. And we every time, I know it's a bit of a task, and you've got to carry them down there, but we don't mind. So every time, if we're up there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, they're set away from us in the darkness, just to do whatever they do. And we've not found nothing so far, guys. No, absolutely nothing. But it's an exercise that we'll continue to do. So showing up on cameras, no, we've not had any of that. Years ago with Bob Brown, absolutely, must be 10 years ago, and we were at the top end of the path, and he shone his torch round and just caught sight. We both saw him, a man walking across the field. I said, "Oh, there's a bloke there, Bob." He said, "Yeah," and he put his torch back. There was nobody there. And it's weird. And he didn't have time to move. It was just, you know, when you'd sweep in your torch and you think, "Oh, Christ."
Yeah.
And there was nobody there. It's a strange one.
Have you ever heard any accounts of anyone coming into physical contact with these? Well, yeah, we have dogman werewolf entities.
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? You know, I mean, the lads in the forest in North Yorkshire, they suffered whatever that was all night. It watched them literally all night. There's an element of missing time there, and I know he sometimes comes in chat, one of them. Always really supportive, but there's an element of missing time there, because there were 3 witnesses and only 2 will speak, but they couldn't decide how long they were there, how long it watched them. But you know, Steve said it were all night. It went just before first light, and they didn't really realise it had gone. Jimmy is not sure if it were there all night, but he can't remember it going. It's a weird one. They thought it were growling at them, and then they realised it weren't. It were its breathing. It were that deep and guttural that it's breathing. I know that's not physical as in touching them, but I think they got as close as anybody would want to get to anything like that. And I really do believe that they saw what they said they'd seen. If you'd have seen the effect it had on them, and it's quite incredible, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Beware the Moon lads is asking, do you think the military know what they are, or are they still learning and just a few steps ahead of us? Now, when Beware the Moon, do you mean there? Do you mean the phenomena itself, or are you talking back about the dogmen?
Just, you know, it might be possible that the military are interested in, and not necessarily what we are doing, what people are doing within the subject, because some people might be more in tune with the things that are being seen and occurring. It does seem to favour some people. You know, we listen to and speak to people from overseas who are interested in the cryptids and involved in it, and some of them seem to have some kind of connection with these things. And if they had, then those people, if the military were interested in the cryptid phenomena, for instance, surely it'd be in their interests to observe the people that claim to be having these up close and personal encounters with these things. Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? You know, as fast as you come up with an argument or a theory as to what you're going to talk about or what you think, somebody in chat comes and counters it and with something really valid. It's
yeah, the subject, yeah, the phenomena itself is contradictory. Every element of it, in every the supernatural, the ghosts, the dogman, the cryptid, the flesh and blood angle, the UFOs, the ETs, the demons, it all contradicts itself, doesn't it? So
absolutely.
Scotch mist, I think much, but not all poltergeist activity is caused by people generated energy.
No, it's interesting though, is it? A poltergeist, I think it's a fabulous thing to look into. I really do, and I don't know what your views on it, Chris, are, but maybe I'm contradicting what you're saying, Scotch Mist. But it's almost to me, it starts off amoeba-ish, really subtle, and from the cases and the people I've spoken to, and you know, you might not agree. Some people might say, no, it don't. It's just slapped between eyes and you're immersed in it. But from my experience, bulk of people I speak to, there's little things happening, little noises, little movements that you think, did I really see that? And then when you become on its radar and it is on your radar, it's almost as though, I don't know whether it's feeding off your energy or you're feeding off its energy, but it grows. It grows and it seems to become almost intelligent. When I say amoeba-ish, there's like subtle things happening to start with, and then cunning and calculated. That might be the grand design of whatever it is that's dealing with us and interacting. That might be the way it does these things. It might have an end game all the time, or it might just be interested in us, and as we're screaming and being and giving off whatever it is, this energy, this fearful energy, it might be communicating and thinking, this is what it wants, I'm going to give it some more of this. You know, it's hard to know.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think that the poltergeist thing, I mean, I'll tell you the interesting contradiction with poltergeist, Paul, is what this case you've just been talking about there, the Hummunby case. And it's not just the Hummunby case, it's a lot of these cases that the poltergeist activity happens before, as you said, it's almost like a precursor to a larger event.
Build up to more. And that's why I kind of likened it. Is there something there that's a magnet? And all these look at all these bits of paranormal as iron filings, and they're all being drawn to it. And is it the lighter ones that come first? Do you know what I mean? As in the strange little bits of things on the periphery, the poltergeist activity. And because Hummunby in general, it started with steel washers hitting the sides of the building internally, by the way, people, in a building that there was only 3 men working in it. Sometimes there'd be only 1 in it, projectiles and hit inside, and then the tinkle of steel as they look to the right, there'd be 1 to the left. Walking behind them, coins had dropped at floor. There's no floors above them. Walking in front of them, gravel had dropped in front of them. And it really became intense. It was, I mean, I'd have loved to have been involved when that were happening, wouldn't you? But it's like all things. I say that, and in 2009, when that stuff were happening at Wilsthorpe, that were probably, apart from 1998, that were probably one of the most prolific years that I've ever looked into for UFO activity and unexplained phenomena. So why weren't I spending loads of time around the Wilsthorpe area? Because I was getting reports from around that area. So I missed out on the main event. So we'd have probably missed out on Hummunby. There might be things happening now. Do you know what I mean? That we don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if the phenomena, because I don't think you can label it all the same thing. I mean, just look at poltergeist cases as a whole. There are poltergeist cases where it's sort of where they tie themselves to young prepubescent teens, as an example. There's some sort of energetic connection there somewhere, or certainly,
it sounds like an energy thing, doesn't it?
Like it casting like bait out sometimes. And I think a lot of us sometimes, like me, for example, say, I never see anything, or I never witness anything. Maybe that stuff's happening, and maybe they've tossed things my way, and I've just not acknowledged it. And maybe some people are just more observant,
more in tune. Well,
tuned in.
Look at Les. about 2 weeks ago. He was really upbeat, and he'd gone to bed, and his curtains are open, and he's seen these orange spheres moving through sky, and prior to that, like he said, he'd never really had any experiences or seen anything. So, he were quite upbeat about that. Well, Les, so interesting.
I heard he frightened aliens. That's what I heard.
He probably did. Probably did. And just before we get on to that, don't forget that we'll be doing the Truth Proof live stream on Thursdays. And if you want to pass any information on to me or to Chris, because I'll pass it on to Chris, unless Chris has got a website or a link that he wants to give out. It's truthproof.uk is the website address, or my email address, which is my name, all in lowercase, Paul Sinclair, ilf@gmail.com. And likewise, Chris, as regards guests, have we got anybody lined up for next week? I'm not sure if we have we?
I don't think we have, but we can try. Do you know what? I'm so busy at the minute.
We know that we won't press her back on.
Yeah, we won't press her back on. Yes,
but sat there in the audience.
Actually, maybe we can. Yeah, maybe actually let's we'll talk, Pierre, about that. Actually, maybe you might need a bit more notice, but we'll see. We don't want to rush you.
And I see Gemma Jackson's in loving the show. Thanks, Gemma, and
yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that information with me last week. Really appreciate everybody that shares information with me. I've update on the big cats that were seen at Burton Agnes Hall. While we're on with this, we know we were talking about missing people, but we've not touched on it. Now, I went and spoke with the lady today. I called her Gemma. Her name's Emma, because I've got the names mixed up, but I only did it once. And so incredible. 2 big beige cats that sound like pumas, that as she's leading a Shetland pony out of to a paddock, and she sees them, and of all things, they're in the big stillage type rubbish bins. And I'd love to say that they were majestically moving through the woodland, but they were in the bins.
They're scavenging in the bin.
Yeah. But she swears that's what they were. She said they were beige, built like thicker set cheetahs with a flattish face, and they sound like pumas to me. So,
scavenging in the bin. It sounds like my cat, to be honest. Mike, the disabled Welshman. My mum got in a Ouija board session when she worked at the cinema a lot of weird stuff, and she could not get out of the cinema quick enough. I bet. Yeah,
and it's almost as though it lulls you in. From a lot of the stories I've heard, Mike, it lulls you in, and it gives you a little bit of what you're looking for at first. And then, I don't know, maybe that's the attachment. Maybe then when your mind's fixed on it, because I don't think these things are hitchhiking, and they're not attached to us, but they get inside here. That's where it's all happening. And they're only a thought process away, maybe. So what's this Pierre saying?
Is Paul working on a new book, and am I working on a new film?
I am working very slowly on a new book, Pierre, yeah. And it's the sub-universe, the submerged universe. So no doubt somebody will probably want to pinch that name, Pierre, but I don't mean you, by the way, mate, because you're straight down the line. But you don't say things sometimes, because we all have the same words, guys, don't we? It's just the way you put them together. And I think it's a great title, the sub-universe. And Chris is working on a few films, aren't you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm up to my eyes in films, and potentially got a big project coming up as well. We work, so I need to really get my ass and I have been doing, to be honest. I know Pierre sent me a message saying I look tired. Yeah, I am tired, but this work needs doing, and it's got to be done. We're all busy, aren't we? Everybody's busy these days, and sometimes we just need to slow down a little bit. But if we slow down, the stuff won't get done.
Absolutely.
So we've got to keep moving.
And myself and Les are working on Wolfland 2, and we were filming last week, and we're filming again on the 21st, which is a Friday. And so
and the weather's great actually at the minute, isn't it? For filming. It seems to be spring is definitely on the way. I was out at the weekend doing a bit of filming. Weather's lovely, and Lorraine's just mentioned in here that we've just got permission to where Lorraine saw that big cat a couple of months back. They've given us permission to put the camera in the field, which is great.
That's good.
Yeah, so fingers crossed. We know she's seen it twice. So
this refers to what Lorraine's on about. So there's nearly 200 people in chat. What do you guys think when we're talking about big cats? And then somebody, and everybody's allowed an opinion, but somebody flat blank doesn't believe it because they've not seen one. To me, it's a bit narrow-minded, a little bit narrow-minded to say, well, or if, I don't know, the cryptid entities, I've not seen one, so I don't believe it. I can believe the seeing is believing, but it's very dismissive when you're almost calling people liars. By what a load of rubbish! Like, we've just got all these comments and we've just got all this information saying that loads of people have seen these things, but you get some kind of abuse because they just don't believe it. And everybody's entitled to opinion, but I think we've got to accept that they're here.
Well, I think the video you did, you got 50,000 views and nearly 500 comments, and majority of the comments were people were witnesses. And I find that amazing, really, that amount of people, I'd say 50% of them have probably never told anybody. No. So it just shows you that there is a big interest in this subject, and that people are, all right, sometimes we talk about, a lot of the time we talk about really strange things, or to them they're strange, but the big cats have definitely hit the mark, haven't they?
It does. I think there's probably because they're a little bit more mainstream, and that's why there's more interest. I'll tell you what you've never seen and nobody's seen. I have got some footage of a big cat.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Oh, you've seen it? Yeah. No. This is walking across a field by two gas technicians who'd stopped for a break at a remote gas place. I don't know what they call these places, where they'd store gas in the middle of nowhere, and they'd stopped for a break. And this thing walked across the field. It even makes a loud sort of cat type roar, not a lion type roar, but a sort of like you'd hear a leopard or something. You know what I mean? Big roar. And it's daylight, and they sent me footage. I've had it a year or so, never done anything with it. So yeah, I've got that bit of footage.
Right, that's the next update.
Nice. It's
Stephen Collin, that's the outlook. They are here and are living and breathing and doing what cats do, trying to keep out of our way. Yeah, absolutely, Stephen.
Yeah, good point. I think best example I can give for the reality of these cats is the fact that I saw one with Bob Brown crossing the road. But even better than that, let's jump to Danes Dyke, this place I'm always talking about, and remember that there were a vagrant and a lovely guy living there 13 years in a tent. Yeah, it's true. 13 years in a tent.
It's crazy, that, isn't it?
He saw it 2 or 3 times in 13 years. So for all the dog walkers that say, I walk around there, I've done it for years and I've never seen it once, and you're on path, mate. You're not deep in woods where this guy lived. Deep in, I know exactly where his camp was because we put him a new tent up just before whoever it was burnt it out. He saw it 3 times. That's how elusive this thing was, or these things are. So interesting.
Yeah, sure. Lee's just saying his camera's up now, and it's up in the big cat kill area that Mick McLaren and Lee are investigating at the minute. There's a video on the channel about that kill just recently, if you want to check that out, guys, and you haven't. And by the way, if you have been watching the videos on the last transmission, thanks very much. We really appreciate you watching the videos and liking the videos and all the YouTube garble, subscribing, and it does help. I know a lot of people chime that stuff out every time, but you have to now with the algorithm. So you guys watching it and liking it is, we really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we feel that you're giving us 2 hours of your time as well, because you're contributing and firing questions and showing interest, which inspires me to keep doing them, and Les to keep doing them, and Chris to keep doing them. Lorraine, Alison, Lee doing moderating. We appreciate that. But if you're sat again your computer now and you're looking at this in 5 minutes' time when we've closed down, you see it subscribe. Just do it. It's free. Just consider doing it. Just subscribe. But we'd appreciate it, and thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tonya.
There's John.
Big Cats are 100% here. Great stream tonight. Thank you, Chris Paul, Lorraine. Good night, everyone. Until the next time. Last transmissioners. Oh, he's coming. I like that. The last transmissioners.
He's closed us down. You've closed us down, John. Thank you very much, mate.
Yes. There's another question coming from PS Back. Are shadow men and aliens linked? Now then.
I don't know, Pierre. I mean, what are aliens? I guess it's all alien. Just what are they? You know, it's all alien and not necessarily from outer space. I think we've long since moved away from the notion now that alien beings have got to be some entity from another star system that are here. You know, they're just we're on Radio 1 and they're on Radio 2. They're just a tweak or some kind of technology away from just slipping in and out of our reality or our visual spectrum. They're here.
Yeah, it's like everything else. I suppose there's a tenuous link there if you choose to, if you look at specific cases, and I think you can say the same for a lot of this thing. There's a link with some things, and then not an obvious link with others. But it all depends which angle you're looking at it from. I think with this,
and there'll be a lot of things, Chris, and that people will disagree with what I've said tonight, what you've said, and
sure,
but we're probably all on the same page. We're all looking for some kind of truth, whether we agree on it or not. It doesn't matter, does it? If it brings us to some kind of conclusion. I mean, I don't necessarily think, I mean, it may be a bit of a defeatist attitude, but I don't necessarily think I'm ever going to find answers. But it's fun trying.
Yeah, it is fun trying.
Thank you,
yeah, thanks, Lauren. I was just about to thank everybody for the donations tonight. Karen, Jude, John Paul Body, Nuki Brown, thank you so much as ever. We really appreciate that. And I keep saying this,
what's that?
We're gonna have to give a prize away, aren't we, Paul?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
I keep saying it, so we're gonna do that. I keep saying a lot of things and not acting.
We said we were going to have a quiz, didn't we? As well, we were going to have. Did we do that?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Why don't we?
Who would be up for that? There's 170 people still stayed with us here. Who would be up for some kind of quiz? And I'll tell you what, if you're up for a quiz, why don't you throw me or Chris and Lorraine a question? Your question. There'd only be you could get it right. Potentially, would that work? I suppose it would, because you wouldn't be cheating. Do you know if you got one question?
I mean, we don't. I mean, you want a few decent ones in there because I don't know. I think the knowledge base is pretty wide in the chat from what I can tell. I don't think there's anyone behind the door, so I don't think we should make too many of them like what year were Roswell. I think we'll leave stuff like that, but I think we can come up with more interesting questions like that.
Yeah.
Sure.
We'll have a think about that one then, guys. So
yeah,
I don't know about you, Chris, but I'm about ready now. If you are,
yeah, I'm done, mate. Yeah, and all that's left to say is thank you guys for tuning in, and we shall see you next Tuesday.
Right. Thanks, Lorraine. Thank you, Chris. Good night.
Night.